first question I wanted to start with is, what brought you to Stanford? You didn't do your residency here, but we were thrilled that you decided to come to Stanford. What was attractive to Stanford when you were making that decision?
I had the privilege of getting clinical training in Boston and working at several hospitals out there and really getting a sense of different hospitals, different experiences. And when it was time for me to become a cardiology fellow and choose where I wanted to do my training, really the key factor for me as I looked at programs across the country was what's the environment for people like myself who are interested in translational work, who want both clinical training but also research opportunities to build an independent career as an investigator. The resources at Stanford go far beyond the hospital to a broader campus full of folks doing innovative basic science, translational, device development, sort of the full gamut of things. And I saw an opportunity to come to Stanford and start building a research career in the niche I'm interested in, where I would have sort of my own place, but also a backdrop of resources and other like-minded scientists to work with.
You were one of our chief fellows this past year, which speaks a lot towards your clinical acumen. Talk about your clinical exposure and experience at Stanford, both before and after the new hospital, really opened.
I have to say I was actually a little bit surprised with just how robust the clinical experience is for fellows at Stanford compared to some other academic institutions. Because, at Stanford, as general fellows, you actually are involved in every aspect of cardiovascular care at Stanford. And I found myself doing things that I didn't see fellows necessarily do at other programs, ranging from actively being involved in interrogating and programming devices, doing hundreds of cath cases, including PCI, being involved with, placement of balloon pumps, as well as doing things like getting into the EP lab to not just watch procedures, but actually do some hands-on with ablation, catheter placement, and device placement. Of course, we have a CCU where we see quite a bit of VAD and transplant, as well as ECMO. And so I had a lot of experience with critical care and some of the more advanced heart failure treatments now, which not every program has. And then for my own personal interest, which is in preventive cardiology, I spent 3 years working with David Mirren, who's truly a national and international leader in prevention, learning to do preventive cardiology, participating in national meetings on prevention, and getting real hands-on experience there.
Maybe you can talk about what it is like to work at the VA system and get involved in research projects like that, and how that has impacted your future plans.
Yeah, that's a really great thing about Stanford, actually, is we do have obviously the affiliation with the Palo Alto VA, which the VA itself is an enormous research resource and clinical resource for academic institutions across the country, but the Palo Alto VA truly stands out as being one of the great VAs in the country. And we have excellent cardiology faculty there, including my research mentor, Tim Asimis, who is one of the many great lead investigators in the Million Veterans Program. Specifically, we look at coronary disease and cardiovascular disease, and have been studying monogenic and polygenic risk for disease, and importantly, trying to understand the genetic risk for disease in populations of non-European ancestry. Many of our patients at the VA have non-European ancestry. We have Obviously, vets who are Black, white, Hispanic, Asian. It's a diverse population, relatively reflective of the US population. So unlike many other large-scale biobanks like the UK Biobank or FinGen or some other European research efforts, we have in the US the Million Veterans Program as a rich resource for trying to understand disease in diverse populations, and in my case, trying to understand the genetics of disease in diverse populations.
You did a lot of teaching of fellows. Talk to me about that role and about the role that fellows play in shaping the program itself.
Getting to be a chief fellow was obviously the highlight of my time during fellowship at Stanford. It was an opportunity to have a teaching role for the junior fellows, to have some administrative roles, and have a place in the division helping to lead activities like cardiology grand rounds. But at its core, the chief fellow role really is about the fellows, and it allowed me to really see how central a fellowship is to an entire division. And I think it was obvious to me that the faculty at Stanford recognize how important fellowship is to all of their activities. And for that reason, it was really inspiring to see how invested our faculty are in the program and supporting the fellows. I also got to see just how committed the fellows are to each other, which I already knew from my own experience going through fellowship, and then taking on the chief fellow role, I depended on that commitment even more. Obviously, in this past year, we as a program have had many changes. We've moved into a new hospital, which is in my background and truly a marvelous building. We've experienced COVID, and we continue to experience COVID. And throughout all of that, as changes happen, we have to depend on the fellows to adapt and support each other. And it was truly impressive to see them do that, to do it with grace and with empathy for each other and for the patients. And it really embodies, I think, what we all want to be as physicians and as colleagues.
You know, you played an important part in our response to George Floyd's murder in particular, and with leaders like Bob Harrington and Eldrin Lewis, we're looking forward to the future where health disparities are reduced. Your research is somewhat focused on this. Maybe talk a little bit about, you know, your perception of how Stanford is handling these issues and where you'd like to see us go.
During my clinical training as a resident and a fellow, there have been now numerous instances of our people, our citizens, Black citizens, being murdered either by police or by, you know, fellow citizens, vigilantes, and there've been protests that have risen from these, and you know, finally, I think academia is getting a wake-up call that we in our institutions cannot just be passively observing these things happen while we go about business as usual. You know, academic institutions play an important role in leading the country. And we also have to recognize our history, which is a history of bias and racism in academia. And so, you know, at Stanford, it's up to us to make sure we evolve as an institution to address that history and change it. And so working within the division, working with Eldrin Lewis, Bob Harrington, and others, we're really trying to find ways that we can do better, whether it's through the diversity of our own staff, our physician workforce, our nurse practitioners and PAs and so forth, our fellowship classes, our medical school and beyond. You know, we're eagerly trying to push the envelope, push our own division, push our department and others to reflect on who we are, and how can we be better?
Is there anything else that you wanted to add that I haven't touched on, Shoa?
I think we've sort of gone through all the key things. You know, I don't know if this has come up with other interviews or if it will, but I will say, again, being an outsider, I came to Stanford from the East Coast. Many people's big concern when making a move like that is all the stuff outside of the hospital. You know, where am I going to live? You know, what's the social life like? What's family life like? These sorts of things. And you know, I have to say that Stanford has done a great job, I think, at supporting house staff across the board with moving out to California. Beyond the GME stipend, which is available on the website, which is adjusted for cost of living, there's additional resources that are offered to fellows as house staff. If you're moving, there's additional money for moving. There's additional bonuses to offset housing costs. There's money to pay for your license and DEA registration. So there's a lot of additional financial resources that aren't reflected just in the salary, which itself is also cost adjusted. And so I personally found it quite doable, quite easy to move out here and live here as a fellow. And I didn't feel there was any significant constraints financially compared to living anywhere else like Boston or New York.
The preceding program is copyrighted by the Board of Trustees of the Leland Stanford Junior University. Please visit us at med.stanford.edu.